What's up, kiddos? Welcome to Baseball Tonight Live. My name is Clinton Yates. We are leading you up to the top of the hour with MLB Encore Tuesdays. And tonight, it's the 2003 ALCS, of course, Game 7, where Aaron Boone went out, ended that bad boy in one of the better walk-offs in the history of the major leagues. Joining us right now is Aaron Boone, of course, manager of the New York Yankees, and Tim Kurkjian, baseball historian and generally the man in my household. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Clinton.
Very good.
So, Aaron, first of all, where are you right now? You got the hat on. You're in the locker room. Where are we coming from here?
No, I'm actually I'm at home in my office in Connecticut here, just trying to, like everyone else, hunkering down as best we can and looking forward to baseball again and looking forward to reminiscing with you guys tonight about a pretty good day.
Awesome. Let's get right into it. 2003, heck of a year in the rivalry overall. You went there halfway during the season, Boone. Tell me about where your season started, though, in Cincinnati.
Yeah, so, I'm with the Reds. It actually got into mid-late July. And actually, I don't remember the exact date, but I know Jim Bowden, who was the general manager, and my dad, who was the manager of the Reds, got fired maybe a week before the trade deadline. And, there was, some veteran guys getting sold off and moved along. And, there was a lot of talk around that time, at least in Cincinnati, about whether I was going to get traded or not. And they kind of came out and said, no, we're moving people, but we're not trading Aaron. Couple days later, right before the trade deadline, I actually spoke with some of the people in the organization just about where everything was, and everything kind of pivoted, and they were going to make me available. So that 48 hours happened really quick to me getting traded. And I remember going to bed the night before the trade deadline, and my agent had told me the Dodgers, the Mariners, or the Yankees is probably where you're going to end up. And I woke up that next morning and called my agent. He said, Brian Cashman's going to be giving you a call. And sure enough, he did. And he said, hey, can you meet us on the West Coast? We're in Oakland playing the A's. And I was like, sure, being traded for the first time, to that point, I'd been in Cincinnati my entire career, came up in the minor leagues with them, spent 6-7 years in the big leagues there. It's really all I knew. And so it was a bittersweet time. I was so excited to be going to the Yankees, to a pennant race, but I was also very sad to leave people that I was very close to and had grown really close to in the whole city, for that matter. So it was kind of a whirlwind. I got out to Oakland. The first 3 pitchers I faced in my American League career was Hudson, Zito, Mulder. And I remember thinking at the end of that series, we're flying back to New York, thinking, I could have just met you guys in New York. I didn't have to go face the And it was the heyday of Hudson, Zito, Mulder.
Right.
It went okay, but I thought it was kind of funny.
I hear you. Tim, tell me a little bit about what that trade was like nationally in terms of how it was looked at. I was in college. I was actually at Miami University. I went to the Great American Ballpark and saw this man play a couple of times. But tell me nationally, Tim, what was it like in terms of what people thought when the Yanks picked up Boone?
Well, Boone had some good years in Cincinnati and in Cleveland, had a couple of 3-homer games. So they needed one more bat, and he seemed to be the answer. Frankly, they didn't give up a significant amount to get him. And the way it's often worked with the Yankees, guys come in and suddenly they're really good players. As soon as they arrive in New York, they do really big things. And I would say that was the case with Boone. I remember 13 years after he hit this home run, he and I were doing a game together in Boston during the Ice Bucket Challenge. So I challenged Boone, and he had to do it in a Boston hotel because you have to do it like 24 hours after your challenge. So he went down to the bar at the hotel and asked this really young guy, could you pour a bucket of cold water over my head for the Ice Bucket Challenge? And the kid goes, well, of course I can. I'd be happy to. You're Aaron Boone. I hate your guts.
That is a true story. That was a funny day.
Baseball Tonight Live, Clinton Yates, Tim Kurkjian, Aaron Boone joining me here to the top of the hour where we get the 2003 ALCS Game 7 where, of course, Mr. Boone went out. So you meet him in Oakland. But tell me a bit about what you're thinking. Spending all that time in Ohio and Cincinnati, you're on the Yankees at this point. You're in the middle of a pennant race. You're from a baseball family, so it's not totally overwhelming. But what are you thinking when you walk into that clubhouse for the first time?
Yeah, frankly, it was a little overwhelming, and not so much the baseball side of things, just all that goes with being traded in the middle of the season. You know, I was in my first year of marriage, had a home in Cincinnati. I had a condo there. So it's all the other things, not baseball related, that, you know, in 24 hours, you're in a completely different situation, looking for a place to live, kind of on the run, getting into a new, you know, everything from as simple as the group you hit with every single day in batting practice, who you kind of interact with and hang with and go to breakfast or go to dinner with, meeting new teammates. So the baseball part is the baseball, but there's a lot of things that turn it into a bit of a whirlwind. So it was a little bit of an adjustment for me. Fortunately, you know, I had Joe Torre as a manager who was amazing from the get-go. He just had a way of putting you at ease and was just really good to play for. And obviously I had a lot of great teammates and guys that were all about baseball and winning. And so it made it sort of easy to kind of fit into that kind of scenario because that's what I was looking for. So, but all the other stuff, you know, made those first couple of weeks, I remember, a bit of a challenge.
Hey, Boone, sorry. What was it like, Boone, to look to your left while you're in the field and you're playing next to Derek Jeter? And tell us what he was like when he would lead off a game and come back to the bench. What was that like?
Yeah. So, you know, my first two experiences, so obviously playing in Cincinnati, I played next to Barry Larkin, Hall of Famer. And then I get traded to New York and I play next to Derek Jeter. So really, you know, I had this infectious impact on guys to my left. Really, you know, I really made the guys around me a lot better. No, it was great. You know, I consider myself always very knowledgeable of the game and grew up in the game and a fan of the game and followed what was going on, not only in our league, but in other leagues. So let me just say, I came into my Yankee career thinking that Derek Jeter was a great player. And what I tell people a lot of times is when I left, I had no idea how good of a player he was. He was just so, you know, he maybe the most confident player I played with. And I say that totally complimentary. Like there wasn't an arrogance to him, but there was a belief and an expectation, especially, you know, when the game was at its most important time. It was, the way I describe it is like, give me the ball. That's who he was. Give me the ball. I got this. And he was like that in the biggest of situations. When he was leading off a game, he would famously come in if he made an out or something. And you almost know, you kind of give it, hey, geez, what's he got? This guy, some expletives in there, but this guy basically sucks, no matter what. It could be, you know, it could be Pedro on his best day. What's this guy got? He stinks. You know,
love it.
Never give it up to him. And we knew it was coming, and we enjoyed that.
So 2003, look, for those of you who aren't Yanks or Red Sox fans, you know, you saw that rivalry. It was what ruled baseball. But Tim, take me all the way up to this series. All right. It got pretty hectic pretty early. Explain to me where everything was in terms of how important both SOX-YANKEES was to baseball at that moment when they met in the ALCS.
Well, Red Sox-Yankees, I believe, is still the greatest rivalry in baseball, better than Cubs-Cardinals, better than Dodgers-Giants. And this was pretty much close to the height of it. I mean, the Yankees always beat the Red Sox before, and you kind of knew it. But this year seemed to be a little bit different. The Red Sox had Pedro. The Red Sox had a lot of firepower. The Yankees, of course, were really good. But that series was filled with some bizarre stuff leading up to all of that, including the Pedro throwing it near people and then threw Zim down to the ground, and Zim left the ballpark. It was a crazy series before we ever got to Game 7.
Well, let's get to that game 3. We've got the footage. Of course, it was one of the more sort of, I don't want to say violent, but kind of goofy, and at the same time kind of awkward, but at the same time entertaining. I don't really know what the word to use is of it now. I know at the time it was just like, wow, this is about as high intensity as anything I've seen in the playoffs in a long time. Boone, tell me a little bit about what that interchange was like, not just on the field, but leading up to that in that particular ballgame.
Yeah. I mean, Kim's right. You know, it is the best rivalry in the game. And at this time, I really felt like, and again, it's all I knew at the time, but it felt like the peak. These were two awesome teams in their prime and playing for a lot, and a lot of, you know, Hall of Fame great players on both sides. And you know, let's be clear, like a clear don't like each other. And so, you know, this was kind of the series and the rivalry that made me say, you know what, momentum in baseball, I don't really buy it, because there were so many times during that season and in that series where I felt like we would have a big win, we would play great, and walk out of there and you're like, all right, we were rolling now, we got the momentum, and the next day the other team would just answer back and punch you right. And it was just this back and forth from the time I got over there playing in regular season games, and then this series was just classic back and forth. When the other team seemed to have the upper hand, the other team would answer. And you know, in this series, we were just the team that in a year long of back and forth, evenly matched, we outlasted them in 11 innings.
I know this is your franchise now, so it's difficult, but that particular fight was weird. I mean, what's happening in your mind when things start getting loose and guys start getting out of the dugout?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of emotion running around out there. Guys are, again, there's a dislike going on out there. You know, you're in these kind of situations, a lot of times you're looking around and you're trying to make sure you don't, you know, get cheap shot, or somebody sneaks up, or you get clipped by some kind of situation. So you're kind of head on a swivel out there, and then you see off to the side, you see Zim down, and you're trying to attend to him and make sure he's okay, and then something brews up over here. You know, these are scary situations sometimes, and this was certainly one of those in the midst of everything on the line to get to the World Series.
Tim, historically, where do you put that little fracas in terms of a lot of different baseball things that have happened? Like I said, it was such a specific moment, seeing what happened between Pedro and Zim. In history, we all think of that as kind of the only thing, but there was a lot that happened there, Tim. What do you remember about that incident that day?
Well, I also remember it was Clemens against Pedro. I mean, Pedro, for the 2-year period, 99-2000, is the greatest pitcher I've ever seen. And Clemens, for career value, you could make the case, is the best pitcher any of us have ever seen. He won 7 Cy Youngs. But the one thing about those guys is you didn't mess with those two guys when it came to defending their turf, defending their guys. So if someone's going to go up and in, Pedro is never going to hesitate to do that, no matter what. And neither is Roger Clemens. So their greatness was exceeded only by their toughness and their I'll get you if you come after me or my teammates. That's what made this so amazing. These weren't the 10th pitchers on the team. These are the 2 of the best pitchers we've ever seen.
Right. You don't expect necessarily 2 number ones to end up going after each other like that. It's not a 7th inning situation where all of a sudden a bunch of guys from the bullpen are coming out, deciding they want to go because they don't have anything better to do. I mean, this was star power, you know? Well, and I think that's one of the things I remember about this. When you started to cut you off, go ahead.
Yeah, no. And remember, this was at the time, Roger Clemens was retiring after this season. So this was probably going to be his last start at Fenway Park, where obviously he broke in and became a superstar pitcher. So, you know, this back and forth tight series, ALCS, World Series on the line, these 2 great teams, but there's also, and these 2 great pitchers going at it, but it's also Roger Clemens in his original home for the last time. So there's just that added buzz and tension and emotion from the crowd and from what's going on the field as well.
Baseball Tonight Live, Clinton Yates, Tim Kurkjian, Aaron Boone, taking you to the top of the hour, MLB Encore Tuesdays, 2003 ALCS Game 7, where this man hit a homer to send them to the World Series. Here's the thing about that game, though, is that like when I look back on it, particularly game 3, before we get to game 7, and I think the baseball in that series, a little bit forgotten. One of the guys you mentioned earlier, Tim Kurkjian, Pedro Martinez. I was at Old Yankee Stadium once and saw Pedro fan 17 guys and big leaguers were still jumping out of the way of his curveball in the 9th inning. Boone, I want to know, tell me a little bit about what it was like to face a guy like Pedro in your career in general, what his stuff was like and what he really overpowered you with and stuck by you as well.
I mean, he had everything. He had, as good a fastball, as good a breaking ball, as good a changeup. So he had 3 elite pitches that you could match up with anyone in the game. Now, what every great pitcher, great starting pitcher ultimately has is command. So he was able to, repeat his delivery and throw those pitches in any count where he wanted to. And then, as we saw in this series, also the lack of fear of going after you if he felt like he needed to, because he had such good command. When he did that, it got your attention. So this was just, especially for the run he had for the period of time where he was the most dominant pitcher in the game, you could probably put him up against anyone this sport has ever seen with just the pitch mix that he had and the command of all 3 of those pitches.
Right.
Tim, where did you rank Pedro on the all-time list?
Well, I was at the 17th strikeout game also. That is the single most dominant game I've ever seen pitched in my life. He made one mistake to Chili Davis, who hit a homer to right center. That's the most strikeouts by any Yankee team in the history of Yankee Stadium. 17. He completely overpowered them. I repeat, Pedro's the greatest pitcher I've ever seen for a short period of time. I think he's one of the 15 greatest pitchers of all time, and I'm with Boone on this. I maintain that 99-2000, he had the best fastball, curveball, and changeup in the game all at the same time. I've never known any pitcher that potentially had the 3 best pitches in the game all at the same time.
Baseball Tonight Live. That's Tim Kurkjian. Aaron Boone's here as well. He's the star. My name's Clinton Yates. Of course, we're leading you to the top of the hour, MLB Encore Tuesdays, presented by Taco Bell. Apparently, York Yankees. So check that out at the top of the hour. All right, let's get to Game 7, kiddos. Let's talk about it. Both Sox jump out to an early lead. Trot Nixon, of all guys, goes out. What do you think in the dugout at that point? There was an error at third base, Booney. They cut to you in the dugout, and they show you with your hat off. What's going through your mind early in that game, Aaron, in terms of what you guys are doing and getting down to both sides?
Well, I'm feeling pretty bad because I was brought in to play third, and I'm not playing in Game 7. Enrique Wilson had amazing numbers against Pedro during the regular season and in his career, and I was scuffling at the plate, so I wasn't in there for Game 7. So I'm, not pouting by any means, but like frustrated more with myself that I'm not playing to my capabilities, that I'm not in there, and then all of a sudden we fall behind early. Pedro's dealing, and it from early in that game is not looking very good, especially when they get off with Trot hitting that homer.
Boone, just curious, did Joe come to you and say you're not playing tonight, or did you just look at the lineup card and there wasn't a meeting?
No, so he didn't play me in Game 3 against Pedro in Boston with that same thing. He said, Enrique's, had his number over his career. You're not swinging it great right now. So he told me. So I had a feeling I might not be in there for Game 7, but the realization when you get there and you're not in there, especially as a regular player, that's tough. But you also realize this ain't about you, and it's time to lock it in and hopefully get a chance to play a role in a victory tonight.
That's what I was going to ask you about. A lot of guys threw in this game. Mike Messina threw in this game. But, other starters came in. You got to stay ready because it's a Game 7 and you don't have a choice. What do you do on a game day like that after you hear, hey, it might not be you in the lineup today, but you might have to be ready anyway?
So as best you can, you kind of stay prepared. Obviously, you're following the game, what scenarios might be coming up, try and think along with the manager, as well as, physically trying to stay ready. So every inning or so, moving around, getting some sprints in, stretching, maybe hit the cage at some point to get some swings in, just trying as best you can to stay ready. But, you mentioned Messina. I think the thing that stands out to me about this game is the amount of people that had a significant role in, ultimately putting me in a good position to do something. That's what really stands out about this game to me.
Tim, this game was big. Game 7, Red Sox-Yankees. 8th inning happens. Grady Little comes out, doesn't pull Pedro. Just how tight was it in that ballpark? Just watching that and being there and seeing what was about to develop.
Yeah, it was amazing. So Pedro came out after 7 innings, looked at the heavens, blessed himself, which is usually the sign that he is done for the day. Thrown 105 pitches. We looked up, hitters batted .370 for that season after 105 pitches for Pedro. When Grady Little came out there, he was at 115 pitches before Bernie Williams came up, after Bernie Williams made it 5-3. And when they didn't take Pedro out then, John Henry, the owner of the Red Sox, looked at Larry Lucchino and said, can we fire the manager before the game is over? That's how big a deal this was, that Pedro was still in the game. Now, granted, he was still Pedro Martinez, but they had Mike Timlin, who had been unhittable in the playoffs. He was ready to go. But Grady Little, who never hid from this, never. He said, that's my best guy. I'm going to stay with him. Pedro never hid from it either. But then Pedro gave up the 2-run double to Matsui, and suddenly we got a tie game.
Boone, what are you guys thinking after Grady goes out and Pedro doesn't come out? Are you surprised? Does that change anything? Do you get a pump in the bat? What are you thinking right then when you sit in the dugout?
A little surprised, but then again, like he said, it's Pedro. And so when he goes back to the dugout, and back then starters went a little deeper in the game. So it wasn't that odd to see an ace stay in the game, even though his pitch count was up there. But there was definitely a sense on our bench that he was beginning to tire. And when Grady went back, I would say we weren't shocked necessarily, but I think we were a little bit surprised and felt like we were finally starting to get to him. Giambi had the 2 homers earlier in the game that kind of kept us in it enough. And we definitely felt at that point like we were starting to have some quality at bats against him.
Baseball Tonight Live, Tim Kurkjian, Aaron Boone. My bad, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, let's not forget Grady Little did a great job with that team, okay? But he got fired 11 days after this game, and Gordon Eads, our pal, called him in between those 11 days, and Grady Little said, you can add my list to the ghosts, meaning of Red Sox, and he goes, and there are ghosts. So he knew something was coming, and as soon as the World Series was over, he got fired. And that's how Tito Francona became the manager of the Red Sox. And Tito was quoted as saying, look, you don't fire a manager for one mistake. Well, that's exactly what they did with Grady Little. That's why Boone's home run was so big, because what it led to was a change in management with the Red Sox, and they brought in the guy who ended up winning 2 championships there.
Hey, funny how that kind of stuff happens. But that's what makes the baseball world go round. If you're too young and you don't know, Boone, you might have think you pinch hit in this game, because it's not like a whole lot of folks remember what happened before, though. What did you do when you got into this game? You pinch ran. Tell me a little bit about how you came into the ball game, because it wasn't just at the plate.
Yeah, so again, at this point in my career, I've only been an everyday player. So it was weird for me, to come in. But it was probably the best thing that happened to me, as I end up pinch running for Ruben Sierra, I think in the 8th or 9th inning. And it actually got me into the flow of the game. I got a couple of innings on defense, made a play, ran the bases. So I was very much in the flow of the game by the time my at-bat came up. And I think that was actually very helpful for me.
Tim, when Boone comes in, it's a defensive change. Like I said, there's been an error at third before. Nobody's thinking a guy's going to hit a walk-off homer. But what did you think at that stage of the game in terms of the defensive strategies and switches that had come up after, the greatest?
Well, we knew they had their best defensive third baseman in the game when Boone was in there. And if things are going to go 14, 15 innings, they have a defensive replacement who's really going to help. But when Wakefield came in, as we know in knuckleballers, depends on the day. They can be unhittable. No one can hit a knuckleball, including Tim Wakefield's when it's thrown well. But you miss with a knuckleball, and it becomes a far, far easier pitch to hit. But we still had no idea what was going on here. And Wakefield would say years later, he just didn't want to be remembered like Bill Buckner. And yet no one ever puts Bill Buckner and Tim Wakefield in the same compartment here.
Baseball Tonight Live. I'm Clinton Yates, Aaron Boone, Tim Kurkjian are here with us, leading you to the top of the hour, 2003 ALCS Game 7. All right, let's get to the AB. Booney, what are you thinking coming to the plate when you did at that stage of the game? What's going through your mind? Like you said, you're in rhythm. You got a couple throws in. You got around the bags. Where are you as a plate approach standpoint?
All right, so I'm running off the field at the end of Mariano's third inning of work out of the bullpen, just kind of shutting them down. And, you know, despite having not a great series offensively, I actually, and almost no success off of Tim Wakefield to that point, I remember feeling like I was going to do something. And, you know, I go down to get my bat. I'm leading off the inning, and Joe Torre says to me, "Hey, Booney, you know, stay through the middle. Doesn't mean you won't go deep, but stay through the middle of the field." So I'm on deck, and as I'm walking to home plate, I'm actually thinking about taking a pitch. And I changed my mind on my walk up to home plate and just, you know, like, you're thinking too much. Get a good pitch to hit, whatever it is. And it happened to be the first one, and I got it.
When I was in high school, we called them FPDs, first pitch dongs. Let's hear it from John Miller. Here's the full call.
Here's Boone. He swings a long high drive down the left field line. It's over. Aaron Boone has homered, and the Yankees have won the pennant. Aaron Boone with only his third hit of this series, and he is the hero.
This to me, Booney, is that it's kind of an excuse me swing. It's not a full-blooded let it go. You kind of turned on it. It was like, all right, let's go. What are you thinking when you finally got around on that, baby?
Well, maybe I took Joe Torre's advice and slowed things down a little bit, and it was just thinking in the middle of the field, but it stayed up for me. You know, I was a high ball hitter, and you know, finally in that series got a hold of one.
Booney, you told me what it was like on that run around the bases. Tell me what it was like. It's going through your head after you hit this ball.
So a couple of things. I remember, first of all, you know, you hit home runs in your career, you run around the bases, no big deal. This time, I do remember telling myself to look around, drink this in. And as I'm running around second base, I wore this pad that Velcroed onto my batting glove that for several years I had broken my wrist and my hand getting hit in that spot. So I wore this pad, and you can see right there, the Velcro is flapping. So I'm actually go to re-strap it around. That Velcro never at any other time in my career came off on a swing, and it did on that one. But as I'm looking around, I'm trying to drink this moment in, and it's one of those things that I don't remember much at all about it, frankly. It's not one of those photographic things that, even though I tried to drink it in, it's all kind of a fog, and I learn a lot more and get a lot more enjoyment from watching the replay because I get to see so many different people's reactions.
Good thing all the cameras were there. Last thing, we only got a couple of minutes left, though, Booney. Your brother was in the booth, which is still the most amazing thing about all of this to me. What was that like as a family moment? Look at him with the brown tones going. I love it.
Yeah, it was cool because, you know, he got to enjoy the night, you know, with myself and Laura and our teammates. He went out with us and hung after the game a little bit. So it was definitely nice having him there and having him be able to share a little bit in that moment.
Now you are Aaron effing Boone to a lot of people. What is that persona like, and what is it like now that when you walk around New York? Obviously, you're the manager, so it's different. Obviously, but in general, for baseball fans, who are you now? What's that like being that person?
Well, you know, before I came manager, you know, I would go to Fenway Park a lot and broadcast games, and you know, for the most part, I feel like I was treated pretty well there. You know, now mind you, I was going back there when they had won 3 championships since that time. So I always felt like it was a little more good nature and ribbing. But now that I'm back on this side and as the manager of the Yankees, it's not quite as good natured now when I go back.
Tim, I'll give you the last word. How great was this moment in baseball history? Never mind Yankees history.
Well, it's anytime, like you just saw, it's Mazeroski and it's Aaron Boone in a Game 7 walk-off homer. That's pretty short list. Mazeroski's, I think, is the biggest home run in Major League playoff or postseason history. So I just know all those years I traveled with Boone, we would do a game at Yankee Stadium, and they would always announce who was in the booth that night. They didn't have to do that, but they would always announce at Yankee Stadium, oh, by the way, Aaron Boone is doing the game from the booth, and he got this tremendous ovation every single time because, of course, of that home run.
Tim, Aaron, I want to thank you very much for your time. Another classic baseball moment. I appreciate it, gentlemen.
Thank you, Clinton. Thank you,
Clinton.
Boone.
Next week, 04 ALCS, Big Papi, David Ortiz, switching to the other side of the rivalry. So make sure you eat a big lunch because that's what you're going to need. It's Baseball Tonight Live. I'm Clinton Yates. Thanks for tuning in.